Okay, let's do this using the graphical tool. We're going to try to do the same query, except we're going to use the graphical tool. It kind of simplifies things a lot of times because it's visual. Personally, though, I really think if you get good at SQL after you've written SQL for a while, it's actually harder for me to go to the graphical tool. It just is. After you figure out how your database is related, get familiar with your database, it is usually actually faster to type SQL, in my opinion. But we're gonna go over the graphical tool because it is on the certification test. You do need to understand how to use the graphical tool, and it can come in very handy at times. So let's do a new query up here. Remember, we're going to rebuild this query with customer ID and sales order dates. So let's do a new query. And then we're going to right click in here, and we're going to go down to Design Query in Editor. Now, if you've taken a Microsoft Office class, which I know many of you are in an Office class now, when you get to Microsoft Access, you're going to see this query designer pop up in Microsoft Access. Even though that's just kind of a desktop database system, you'll see a lot of this. And a lot of people who know Access very well only know how to do queries when they're in this designer window. So I'll warn you that some of the business teachers get a little irritated when they assign you how to do a query in Microsoft Access and you guys get it done really quickly because you go in and just type the SQL code, because you can do that in Access, but they want you to learn how to use the graphical. So what tables were we using? We were using the customer table. This kind of looks familiar, doesn't it? Just like we were selecting our tables in our diagram. Customer table and sales order header. There it is. Hit my control key so I can select them both at the same time and hit add. And look what happens. It gives us a different view. Actually, it's kind of a convenient view, right? We can actually see the keys and their relationships here. Notice there's a little infinity sign down here. Remember we talked about one-to-many relationships. So one customer can have many sales order headers. So we have an infinity over here. This is a key over here. What do we want to see here? Let's see. We picked the customer ID last time for our query. Let me expand this a little bit. So we're getting the customer ID out of this table. We are getting, actually we're not. Yeah, customer ID and order date. That's what we did in the last query. So here's the order date. So those are the two things we look down here that are going to be in our query. And if you look as I check these, it's building our query down here. Select sales.customer.customer ID, comma, sales.salesorderheader.order date. Okay, from sales.customer interjoined with sales.customer on, and it automatically has our join condition because it knows that relationship's there. We'll learn how to create those relationships when we get to building tables later on. So that's it. It wrote our query for us. And if we say OK, it puts it in here. Now it's pretty verbose. And the word verbose means it's long. It doesn't use any kind of shortcuts, and it doesn't use any kind of aliases, and it's hard to read code. So it's not really something I would want to do as a professional writing code, is to leave this like this. But it can be a useful tool. Can we execute this query? We can execute it, and we see the same thing that we saw the last. We want to edit it. We should be able to right click, go back down to the editor. That's not right. All right, I told you I don't use this tool very often. I actually paused the video recording for a second so I could remember how to do this. If I right click in here and go back to the tool, Design Query and Editor, notice it's starting out with nothing, asking me to pick tables again. If we want to go back, I'm going to use Control A, or you can drag your mouse to highlight. Just need to make sure you have all your code for the query highlighted. Then right click and say Design Query and Editor, and it will take you back to where you left off. Okay. So you can go back and forth, but remember, you have to have the code highlighted that you want to go re-edit in here. So what else can you do in here? Sort order. Maybe if I want to order this by the order dates, I can come in here to sort order. I'll put a 1 there. Say OK. So now I got an order by clause. Oops, it had something highlighted. There we go. So now we're ordered by order date. Switch back to the tool. If I want to filter, I can look for, let me just say, customer ID equals 29825. Okay, and then it says where customer ID equals 29825. So I'm only going to see this guy that shows up in my first row, and there is all of his orders. So you can use this to build all kinds of complicated queries. So feel free to play with that. I would advise you not to start using that for all of your queries, because to really be good at SQL, you need to get practice at typing and creating queries without using the graphical tool. But it is there. There are options in here, and feel free to use them when you want. Also, it's easy for me to tell if somebody's using the graphical query editor for everything, because it's so verbose, and it writes working code, but it's not really good code. This is super, super long, and it would be much shorter and easier to read if we use some table aliases in here. So think about that. You have alias columns as well. So I guess technically, these are column aliases, I believe. If I put the word customer here. And then execute it, you can see customer ID as customer now is up there, and it actually puts the word customer at the top. So lots of things you can do with that. Use it when you need to. You'll be better if you don't use it too often, but people will do what they do.